During this section, we are going to explore a pretty interesting approach for real-time applications, and this is the time for a real-time API. Yes, we are going to implement an API and we are going to expose real-time capabilities to notify, let's say, on real time, our users of any change, our clients, the clients that use our API. So for that, what we are going to do during this class is, well, to create a small API to use it as an example. So as we already have users, we are going to create an API to handle users, to create, read, update, and delete users. For that, we are going to create a resource controller associated with that user as a resource. So for that, once again, we can use PHP Artisan. And this time we are going to create a controller. The controller is going to be called user controller. But just to separate the concept, we are going to put it in the subfolder which is API. Then we are going to specify this is a resource controller that is going to operate over a resource, and Laravel is going to create several actions. And we are going to operate over a specific resource, a specific model, which is user. Once we have that, we can go to our app HTTP controllers, and there exists a new folder API with the user controller inside. You can see we have user controller, and Laravel created several actions for us: index, create, store, show, edit, update, and destroy. You can see that destroy, update, edit, and show operates over an existing instance of the user. Basically, you receive the request with the ID of that user in the URL, and then Laravel injects automatically for you the instance that matches with that specific ID. Of course, if that ID does not exist, so it is going to return a 404 error. Now, we don't need two possible actions here, the create and the edit one. As you can see, those are intended to create views, or basically return views with the formulary to edit and to create the instance. But this is an API and we don't need formularies, we don't need views at all. So we just need to remove that, and the same for the create one. So we will have the index method to show the full list of users. So I'm not going to stop here with a lot of details about transformations or JSON data or how to transform that correspondingly. No, I'm just going to use the default characteristics of Laravel to make it easy and just to have a small API to use, and then go to the real application which is expose the real-time characteristics for this. So I'm just going to return a call to user all, which is going to automatically obtain the full list of users and is going to transform this on JSON after the collection that we are getting here. Then in the store method, we need to do several things. First, as we are receiving the request, we are going to establish the data from the request, obtaining the full list of elements that we are receiving. I'm not going to perform any kind of validation. We are going to assume the validation is going to pass. It means we are going to receive always valid requests. I know it is not the case, but this is just going to be a simple API, so we don't need to stop on unnecessary details at all. So then it is very required, so we need to transform the password and encrypt that correspondingly. So I'm going to access the password index in our array, and then we are going to use the bcrypt helper to encrypt this element from the request, which is of course the password. Once we have this modification, so we just need to return an instance, a new instance of this user created using that data. So this is going to transform this user on JSON to be returned in the browser. Then to show, well, this is going to be very easy because we just need to return the instance of the user that we got resolved here. Then we have the update, which is a little similar to create. So then we need to obtain the full information, the data from the request. We transform the password, we encrypt the password, and then we need to use the existing user instance that we have here to fill all the attributes that it may have. using the data, and once it is filled, so we just need to save into the database. Once it is there, so we just need to return that specific user and not create a new one, of course. So let's return that instance. And finally, to the destroy, well, we just need to delete the instance of the user that we received here. So we call user delete and return the instance of the user. Now, you might be wondering how it's possible that we are returning a user if it is deleted. Well, because once we get this from the database, this is on the memory, we remove that from the database, but it is still in the memory, so we can return the details of the user from the last time, because after that, this user does not exist and cannot be retrieved again. Okay, so at this point, we have the capabilities to remove, to update, to show, and create, and basically list the full actions over a user. We can basically perform CRUD operations over a single resource, which are the users. So the only thing that we have to do now is to create the match, or basically the bridge between our actions that we have here and the possible routes that we may receive, the request at all. So let's go to the routes, and as it is an API, we need to go to the API routes to don't have CSRF protection, to don't use sessions, to don't use anything that we don't need, because this is just a simple API. And Laravel is going to make this very easy, creating a API resource route, specifying that the resource is users on plural, and the controller with the actions is API user controller. Remember, this is on a subfolder, so this is API \user controller. So just to be sure that this is working, we are going to use a tool called Postman. You can go to your browser and download it if you don't have it. It is going to be easy, of course. You just need to install. And if you have running your server, be sure that you are using, for example, PHP Artisan Serve or whatever that you prefer for this. We can send requests to this specific URL. So let's do it. All the routes that are on the API file needs to be under a prefix which is API. So, for example, to get the full list of users, which is the index method, we just need to send a GET request. So you can see that we have two users, which are the users that we created on previous classes. Then we can list, for example, a specific user, let's say the user with ID number 2. There you have. Then we can use a post request to create a user without passing any ID, because we are just creating this. So we need to specify a body with the form data, with a name, with an email, and with a password. So let's send the request. You can see we have a new user. So if we list all the users, we have 3 now, with the latest one, of course. Let's try to update this latest user. So we need to send a put or patch request specifying the ID. In this case is the number 3. So let's use, for example, patch. And in the body, we need to use, instead of form data, we have to use form URL encode here. And let's change, for example, the name only to test3. So if we send, we can obtain the latest data from this user. Again, if we get the details from here, from all the users, so you can see we have this new information. And finally, we can check if we can remove an existing user, sending only the ID of the user that we want to remove. And additionally, this is the latest one that we created just to be sure. So let's send. There is it. This user was returned the information, but currently has been removed, which means that if I try to obtain this, I'm going to obtain a 404 error, as you can see here in the preview. And of course, if I'm trying to obtain the full list of users, it is going to obtain only the 2 original ones. So yes, at this point, you created in one single class a API using Laravel, of course. And then in the following classes, we are going to start creating the events and all the stuff that we need for broadcasting on real-time events related with creating, updating, and removing users. see you in the following class to show you how to do that. Now you have an API that works perfectly good with Laravel, of course. We can check that with Postman. And now we are going to use that API to obtain and show from our project the list of users into a view. And that is going to allow us to modify this list on real time after exposing in the following classes the real time messages to notify when the list of users change for any reason, a creation, an updating, or a delete. So let's go to start with that. We are going to need a route. So let's go to routes, web.php, and there, of course, we are going to create a small route to return just a view that is going to contain the list of users. So for that, we can use route view, which is going to allow us to specify the URL, which is going to be, for example, users, and the view that we are going to return, which is going to be inside a users folder, and we are going to call that, for example, show all. You can specify a name for this route, just in case that you want to use it in your code. And then, of course, we just need to create this view. We are not passing through a controller because we don't need it. We just need to return the view, and then from the JavaScript and the real-time components, we are going to take care of obtain this list of users and keep it updated. So let's go to create that in our resources views, and there we are going to create a new one inside the users folder with that specific name. So we are going to copy, for example, the welcome page. So we can just take that, go to users, show all. Then we have the layout. Inside we are going to have the list of users, and in the body of this card we are going to show a list with every single user that we may have into our system. So it's to have an unordered list, and to make a reference to this from our JavaScript, we are going to identify this with users. That's all. Inside this, we are going to insert the list of elements that we have for our users. And it comes, the magic, because we are going to do that using our API, making a request from the JavaScript using Axios. So for that, we just need to create a script, and we are going to use the stack that we created on our previous class. Remember, in our layout, we created for the script a stack called, scripts. So we are going to insert a set of scripts for that, and we are going to start from 1 to obtain the list of users on real time, let's say, using a request from JavaScript. So it's to create a script tag, but of course we need to specify where we are going to put that specific script. So let's to push to the scripts stack. So let's to close the push. And inside we have the script that we want to implement. So the only thing that we have to do is to use Axios to send a GET request, and we just need to obtain the full list of users. So this should go to API users, because this is just a GET. We are going to obtain the full list of users. So once it is executed, we are going to obtain a response, and we are going to, of course, execute some actions from this response. So we are going to create a constant to represent the user's element. Once again, we are going to use the ID of this element in the document, which is users. We just created that here. And once we have this element, so we are going to obtain the list of users from the response. And we need to loop over the list of users to create every one of them. So let's to use a for each. And in the for each, we are going to loop over the user, and alternatively, you can use an index in case that you may use, of course. So let's to have this there using an arrow function, and there we are going to create an element which is going to be inside the list. So create element, and the type of element is just a list item, an LI. Then for this element, we are going to establish several things. First, we need the attribute to identify this. So we are going to set an attribute for the ID. And the value of this ID is going to be exactly the one of this user. Remember, every user has an ID, so we can specify that there. Then we need to specify the text, the inner text of this element, which is going to be equals to the name of that user. We can use the email or any other things, but let's use the name, for example. And once we have this element, which is values, and this attribute, so we can use this and add it to the user's element, just appending a child. So if everything is okay, we should be able to go to our project, make a request to users into web browser, and we are going to obtain the full list of users using access through a request to the API, as you can see here. So let's go to the browser. Let's go to the local host, or basically our local IP, and there we just need to go to users, and there we should have populated here the list of users, but it looks like it is failing, so let me check that in the console. Yes, it looks like element is not defined. Let's see. And of course I just made a typo here. Let's verify element. That's good. So let's go to refresh now again, and you can see that we are getting the full list of users. Of course, if you create a new user, if you change any of those users, it is going to change, but only is going to be visible if you refresh. So we are going to start changing that in the following classes, adding the real-time events that are going to be broadcasted, let's say again, on real time, once a user is created or updated or deleted, and then we are going to listen to these events in our frontend directly on this view. So let's do that in the following classes. Okay, so this is the method. At this point, we need to dispatch or basically broadcast an event every time that we have several possibilities or several actions. One, when we create a new user, for example. Another, when we update a user. And the other one, when we remove or delete a user. So we are going to use a different approach, which is a much better approach probably for this scenario, which is creating 3 different events, and every one of those is going to be broadcasted or dispatched at the moment that that specific event occurs. It means we are going to dispatch a user created event when we received a creation event from Laravel. This is basically the same as the login or logout. Laravel dispatches an event when an instance of user is created, so we can match that with a specific event as well, and then just call it. But fortunately, Laravel is going to allow us very easy, as we are going to see in the following class. For now, we are going to create several events for that. And as I said, we need to create several events. You might be thinking about creating only one event and then share the type of the event, if it is created, updated, or deleted, and that is going to work very nice. It is going to be possible. You just need to handle in your JavaScript if it's a create, a delete, or an update, and make any specific action. But I just prefer to show you a different approach, creating different events for every single possibility, and then in your JavaScript, instead of adding a condition, you can listen to several actions or several events. So let's go to create that, duplicating one of the events that we have. So in this case, we have, of course, user session changed. So let's duplicate this, and we are going to start creating one called user created. This event is going to be dispatched when a user is created, of course, and that means that we just need the details about that specific user. So then we just need to import the definition of user here, or inject that in our constructor, to be sure that we are receiving an instance of user there. We just need to assign this, and of course we don't need a type. So this is the instance of the user that has been created. It is not any kind of user, it is just the user that was created. And then we are going to broadcast that in a channel. So let's use a public channel again. And now the channel is going to be called users. Be sure to import the definition of this directly from Illuminate Broadcasting channel, just in case it is not there, and that's all. You are going to broadcast the details of the user that was created. Of course, if you prefer, you can just specify some elements, the ID, the name, etc. into a set of attributes, or just keep the full object here and preserve the original state of this instance. So this is basically the same structure that we need to create for the other event. So let's duplicate. Now it is going to be user updated. Let's copy that. Now we have user updated, and once again we are going to receive and use a user, but this time it is not the created user. It is the user that has been updated. And well, this is going to use exactly the same channel and still being a public channel, and then we are going to do basically the same for the user deleted. So let's duplicate, user deleted, and then we just need to specify the name. So yes, every one of them are basically the same, but they are intended for different issues. And even when they are having only an instance of user, those are different circumstances and instances of the user. This is a user created, this is a user updated, and this is a user deleted. All of them are completely different and different instances of the user itself. Now, again, you can create just one single event if you prefer, adding a type and specifying if it is a creation, an update, or a delete. This is another thing that you can do, but well, I just want to show you a different approach and to explore the possibility to have several listeners in one single channel in our frontend. For now, we are done here. We are capable to dispatch now all the single events, and we can do that in the following class using the model, and it's going to be very easy thanks for the Laravel characteristics. See you there. It is time now to, let's say, dispatch or broadcast the events that we already created in the previous class once that actions occurs. It means when the user is created, so we are going to dispatch the event of the user created, the same for updated and the same for deleted, of course. And fortunately for us, Laravel is going to allow to do that very easily into our user model. And basically what we are going to do is to attach for every single possible action over the user, or at least the action that we need or take care, and say which events to execute or dispatch in that action. So if we check the base model of this, we can go directly there in the base model of Laravel, which is located into Illuminate Database Eloquent Model, and there you can see that it is something called has events. In the has events, there is a very interesting attribute which is dispatches events. Of course, there are some others, there are functions, etc. But we need to take care about this because here we are going to say what event to dispatch when something happens with this model, in this case for the user. So let's go to add this and let me show you what we are going to do with this. So there are several possible actions that are executed for a model. Doesn't matter if it is user, product, category, currency, whatever model that you have, it is going to dispatch events at some points. For example, before to create or during the creation, after the creation, the same for update and delete. And even you can create and attach events when you are showing or retrieving instances of the elements. For now, we just need to take care for created, updated, and deleted. So we are going to have 3 of them, which is created, updated, and finally deleted. And we already have the events for every one of those actions. So we just need to specify the name of the class for that event. So this is user created. We just need the name of the class. Then we have user updated. And finally, user deleted. Be sure to import the definition of every one of them, created, updated, and deleted. You can find this at the top of the class, as you can see here. And at this point, when an instance of user is created, so it is going to execute this specific event, the same for update and delete. And every single event, as you can see here for user created, for example, is going to broadcast, because it should broadcast to this specific channel, which is public, sending the information of the user, which is this. So, to be sure that it is working, what we are going to do is go to every one of those single events, and we are going to call to log the book, and we are going to put there the action, and for example, the username. Remember to add the backslash at the beginning, just to don't have to import the definition, as it is a temporal line. And let's do the same in the other events. So we have user updated. This is of course updated. And the same for deleted. So if we open Postman again, we can try to check if it is working properly, getting the events registered in our logs. If remember, the storage logs has the location, of course, of the Laravel log, where we are going to see these specific messages: created user X, updated user Y, deleted user Z, etc. So let's go to Postman, and there we are going to send a request, for example, to create a new user. So let's repeat this previous request. Let's say this is going to be user 4, so test 4 for the email. We have some password, and if we send, it should be working, but this is not the case because, of course, I didn't import it from the previous class the definition of user in every one of our events. So let's import this on user created, the same for user deleted, and finally for user updated. So in this case, it is going to take care of the definition of this, of course, because Laravel is injecting an instance of this user model. So let's try again to create this user. Let's try, for example, with test 5. Try again. There we have the results. So if we go back to our log, you can see at the bottom that we have created test 5 API, which is good. Now let's try to update this user, sending a patch request to this ID, which is going to be number 5. Let's go to the body, and there we are going to change the name only to test 5. Let's send. There we have. So if we go to the log, there you have updated test 5 with that new name. And let's remove that same user, sending a delete request. So if we send, it is going to be removed, and there is the issue results that for some reason it is failing. But if we try to obtain the list of users, you are going to see that test 5 is not there anymore. And this is the problem. Results that in our user deleted event, we are using a trait called serializes models. And this specific trait is trying to retrieve the latest or fresh instance of this user before to dispatch the event. But results that we just removed that specific instance, so when the framework tries to obtain a fresh version of this, it is going to fail, as we are going to see, because it's not capable to find that user. So in the specific case of user deleted, we need to remove this trait in order to avoid this issue and try to dispatch this event without retrieving a fresh instance, as it does not exist. So let's go to try again. Remember, this user was already removed, so let's try to remove, for example, the user with ID number 4. So if we go to delete, send the ID number 4, there you have. This has been removed. You can get the full list with the original 2 users, of course, without passing any ID here. And there in the log, you are going to see at the bottom that you have, for example, that the user with ID number 4 was completely deleted. So that's all. At this point, you are perfectly dispatching the elements, and you can see that in the log for every possible action that we may care. Now we are going to see how to do that in the front end to listen to that different events and perform different actions over the list of users that we have in our view. See you in the following class. Currently, you already have a real-time API. Yes, you are already exposing and broadcasting events when your list of users changes in some way, when you have a new user or when an existing user is updated or deleted. So yes, you are already sending that elements, the user details, and the only thing that you have to do, or the clients that might be using your API, is to listen to that specific events and do whatever they need. In this case, just as an example, we are already using a list of users that we have here, and we are going to react on real time for these events when the user is created. So we are going to add a new element to the list when a user is updated. So we are going to change an element on the list, and of course when it is deleted, well, we are going to remove that element from the list. So as we already have our real-time API, we just need to go to our view and take care of listening for that specific events. So let's go to resources, views, users, and there we have the show all. Then we are going to add a new script to the stack of scripts. And this time we are going to use an echo channel. Remember, this is a public channel, so we are going to listen to users. And there we are going to have several events. One is for user created. Then we are going to have an action that needs the event itself, which is going to have the user details. Then we are going to perform some actions. And later we have to listen to user updated and user deleted. Every one of those events is receiving the event itself, and that event has inside the user. Remember, those are different actions, so we are performing different actions over our list for this. So, of course, when we are receiving a new user created, so we just need to add a new element here, just like we are doing into the for each, but this time the information doesn't come directly from the for each. It is going to come from the event. So we create the element, which is going to be a list item. Then we set the attribute, and the user ID comes from the user, but the user comes from the event. So we need to say e.user.id. Then in the inner text, the same. To access the name, we need to access the user from the event. And finally, we are just adding the element to the full list of users. Pretty nice, pretty easy, because we are very consistent on this. Of course, if you prefer, you can create a function to generalize this, but well, we are just repeating this here and in other place, and that's all. So we don't need to go beyond this, creating new components, because it is not completely required, but of course, it is up to you. You are not forced to follow this course like it is. You can create your own code once you understand how it is working. And remember, we are just now executing the actions because our API is already working on real time, dispatching and broadcasting the events. Now, we have the event when the user is updated. So, we are going to need a new element as well, but this time, this element is going to be obtained based on the ID. So, we are going to create a constant here, and this is the element. Let's go to call this consistently with the element that we have here. But now the ID is going to be the ID of the user. So remember, the user comes from the event, and there we have the ID. Once we have this element, so what we have to do is to modify the inner text. We are just going to change the name. The ID never changed, so we just need to take care of the value that we are showing. So element.innerText, and this is going to be equals to the name of the user that comes once again from the event. Once you have this, so you already updated the element on your list. And finally, but not less important, we are going to remove the element from the list. So once again, we obtain the element based on the ID, but this time we are not going to change the text. We are going to completely remove the element. So we use the element to obtain his parent using the parent node, and then from the parent node we call to remove child, and send the child that we want to remove. So, if everything is okay, we should be able to come here, to refresh. There should be nothing on the console, but it looks like there is something related with the arrow list parameter. So let's try to check. And of course, I need to remove this. This is just the second parameter. This should be a comma here. Let's try to check again. Let's do refresh. Okay, so we are done here. Remember, this error is related because this user is not authenticated, so doesn't have access to the channel of the notifications, but this is not related with our current functionalities. So, if we try to register a user, and I'm going to do that on real time on the other side. So, let's go to this same location, for example. Let's try to register a new user. This is going to be text 6, for example. And it looks like there is an error because, of course, we can see this here saying that user's element is not defined. So let's verify that quickly. This is when the user created event was defined. And of course, here we are trying to use a variable that is not defined. It has been used previously inside the main function, so it is not capable to access that in this location. So let's to add this in our unlisten. We just need the user's element here because you can see that for the updated and deleted it is not used anymore. So let's to save here. Let's to refresh on both sides. We have the 3 users, but after refresh, so let's to log out and try to register a new user. Register here, test 7 for example. And there we have. Once the user is registered, it means the user was created. We have this here. Of course, if we go to Postman and try to create a user as well as we have here, for example, let's try to create test 8 for the API. So we are going to have exactly the same result. You can see we have different clients from different locations around the world, for example, and we are reacting on real time. We can even have several clients on several users checking this URL, and all of them are going to see on real time how it is reacting to the event. So let's try, for example, to modify this user with ID number 8. So let's go to users /8. We are going to send a patch request, for example, and we are going to change the name to only user test 8. So let's to send this, and voila. You can see how on real time again we are updating the username. And finally, once we remove this user, let's try, for example, to don't be very trivial to remove the user with ID 7. So let's to send a test request for this, deleting this user, and it is going to remove not test 8 or 6 or 1 or 2. It is going to remove the test 7 element. So if everything is okay, there you have. We have finally 4 users removing the test 7 one. So congratulations, you already had a real-time API and you can see how it is working on real time as well when the users are dispatched from the different events created, updated, and deleted. That's all. See you in a following section to start exploring another possible functionalities and real-time applications. See you there.